Hi, my name is Vicky Lumley and I work for the University Hospitals of Morecambe Bay NHS Trust. Welcome to this video workshop for job seekers. I work in an NHS careers team and we run a range of different projects and events designed to inspire and support people into careers within health and care. We've designed some videos specifically for job seekers, and these are the aims of the videos. The first video workshop helped people to identify their skills and unique selling points. This video will hopefully help you to give you some tips and advice about writing some personal statements for cover letters or job applications, but also give you an insight into the range of careers on offer within health and care. And our last video workshop in this series will look particularly at the recruitment process and application form for jobs for the NHS Jobs website. So let's get started. Now, different employers and organisations have different expectations for the hoops that they expect you to jump through when applying for a role there. Some only require you to hand in or upload a CV, whereas others might ask for a cover letter with a personal statement kind of element. Other organisations require an application form, and the NHS is one of those organisations, so we'll look at that in the third video workshop. And other organisations might ask you to complete questions for like an essay question or to submit answers to a test. So just different organisations have different processes, and it's worth having a look at that process when you're looking for jobs in that organisation. Now, some of these processes can be prepared beforehand. So your CV, for example, can be quite generic and you can kind of prepare that beforehand. So long as you keep it up to date and it's easy to read, it's essentially a map of your experiences, your skills, your qualifications. So if you keep that up to date, it can be then easily sent off to different job vacancies that you're applying for. Whereas the cover letter and application form can be sometimes a little bit trickier for people because you really need to tailor them to the role that you're applying for. And that's sometimes what people struggle with. So I thought we could have a look at how to do that. Now, tailoring to a role, essentially, I think of this like baking a cake. Now, to bake a cake, I'm not very good at baking or cooking, so I'd be heavily reliant upon a recipe. I know that cakes generally require some of the same ingredients, so they always require like eggs and milk, for example. But if I'm going to bake a particular type of cake, I would need to follow a recipe and it will tell me exactly what ingredients to use. And obviously the ingredients will vary depending on the type of cake that you make. So for example, in this cake, you need golden syrup and cocoa powder. So it will tell you exactly how to make this chocolate cake. Whereas this one will have slightly different ingredients, a slightly different method, and makes a very different cake. This one's for a vanilla sponge. And this one, again, has a huge list of ingredients, again, slightly different ingredients and a very different method with fewer steps to follow, but it will make a carrot cake. So as you can see, it's important to read that list of ingredients and the method to find out exactly what's required. And obviously you'll need to include different things in order to make that particular cake. You can't just use the same ingredients for every cake. And the same can be said of job applications. Each job application is essentially a list of ingredients and a method that that particular organization is looking for that particular role. So you can't always just use the same personal statement or cover letter in your applications. You need to particularly change your cover letter, change your personal statement so that it fits that particular role, just like you have to include different ingredients to make that specific cake. So usually on a job vacancy, there are a couple of documents attached. One of them is usually called a person specification. And I think of that as essentially just a list of ingredients that they're looking for in their perfect person for that role. Usually on a person specification, here's an example, you'll see the list of ingredients has been split into essential criteria and desirable criteria. And what that means is that all of the things that are in the essential box are the ingredients that you must have in order to make that cake, if you will. Whereas in the desirable box, those are like the sprinkles on top or maybe like cherries or chocolate buttons that you might use to decorate the cake. So in order to be the successful candidate for this job, you would need to show in your application that you have all of those ingredients in the essential box. Obviously, just like a cake recipe, the list of ingredients is going to vary depending on the role. So this one is for a project officer. You can see that all of the ingredients kind of lend themselves towards an administrative role. So things like IT skills, prioritizing, good numeracy skills, you need a degree, you need to be able to use Microsoft Office, for example. Whereas in this other example, this is for somebody working in a zoo as an entertainment manager. This person needs to be able to do customer service, look after animals, the ability to deliver talks to large groups of people, and interact with children and adults. Obviously, just like the cakes, they're looking for a very different list of ingredients because it's a very different role. Crucially, your application needs to show that you've got the ingredients that they're asking for. And the job description document that's attached is like the method part of a recipe. It details the expected tasks or activities that the person would be doing in that job. So when you're writing your application, it's worth having a think about how you can demonstrate that you've got those ingredients and that you can do those tasks. So my tips for tailoring your personal statement or your cover letter to a role is to do your research on the company and the organization. Have a look at their website, for example. You can find out lots of information about different companies using their websites. They'll tell you about their values, the expectations that they have of their staff, and it's worth using their actual vocabulary. So if, for example, time and time again on their website, they use the word high performance, or they use quality customer service, that tells you that those things are really important to that company. So make sure that you use that same vocabulary in your cover letter and show them in your cover letter and your personal statement that you've done that research. Have a look on the internet for things about their history, their humble beginnings perhaps, or maybe challenges that they've overcome, and just drop little bits like that into your personal statement, because that will show the recruitment team that you've done your research and that you're really interested in working for them in particular. And that really comes across well to recruiting panels. As I said before, read any vacancy documents really carefully and make sure that you refer back to them in your personal statement. So, for example, if they've got their list of criteria on the person specification, make sure that you actually specifically say how you've got those ingredients and where you've picked them up from, what experiences you've had, how have you developed those skills. And definitely draw links between the organization, all of the research that you've done on their website, and the skills, values, and experiences that you've had. Because if you can make it clear in your cover letter or your personal statement that you've actually got all of the ingredients that they're asking for, then it'll be very easy for the recruiting panel to think, yep, this is the kind of person that we want. We'll invite them for interview. And once you've been invited to interview, that's when you can really wow them and let them see your personality and things like that. So those are my tips for a successful supporting statement or cover letter. Now let's have a think about healthcare careers in particular. Obviously, I work for the NHS, so it's my role to showcase the different range of careers on offer within health and care. And I think a lot of people are surprised how many there are on offer. A lot of people think of the NHS and just think of nurses, doctors, and paramedics. But actually, we have a huge range of jobs on offer, from plumbing, catering, anything you can think of really. We require it within health and care. There's actually over 350 types of careers, and we have jobs that you might see a lot of these terms that are on the screen just now in the job vacancy adverts online. So for example, clinical roles, that just means that you're in a role, in a position in which your job is directly having an impact on the rehabilitation or treatment of patients. That's what we mean by clinical. Whereas non-clinical means that you have an indirect impact on the rehabilitation and treatment of patients. So for example, my role as a careers lead is a non-clinical role because I don't treat patients, but I try to make sure that we've got the correct people in the correct jobs so that we've got our future workforce in place that do treat the patients. So I have an indirect impact on the treatment of patients, and that's kind of what non-clinical roles have. Similarly, we've got lots of roles that are patient-facing, which means you have direct interaction with patients. but that doesn't necessarily have to be a clinical role. So for example, the lab staff, we've got lots of different healthcare scientists working in our labs in our hospitals. That is a clinical position because they are having an impact on the treatment of patients, but they don't usually have patient-facing roles. They don't necessarily have to go and speak to patients or treat them face-to-face. So we've got lots of options if you would like to have a clinical or non-clinical role, or if you'd like to be patient-facing or non-patient-facing. There's really a job for anyone. Similarly, we've got full-time contracts, part-time contracts. Some have permanent roles and some are fixed-term contracts. And the other kind of contract that we often have in healthcare is something called the bank. That's essentially like a substitute on a football bench. Those are people who are trained to do a role, but they're called upon sometimes at short notice to complete shifts or to fill gaps that need to be filled when the permanent or fixed term contracted staff are maybe ill or on annual leave. So we've got lots of bank roles, and if you see that word on a job advert, just know that it means sort of temporary staffing and that you can be a little bit more flexible with the shifts that you do. Let's have a look at some NHS jobs. Which ones do you think here are the odd ones out? Which ones do you think are not NHS jobs? Well, I hope you've realised it's actually a trick question. All of these are jobs that you might have within the NHS, and that surprises some people. For example, the pilot or the engineer or even a gardener. That sometimes surprises some people because they think only of the clinical roles that we might see on television or that you might interact with if you go into the hospital. And as I said, there's actually 350 different types of careers. So any job that you can think of, you could really do within the NHS. And we need people with a huge range of different backgrounds and skills. The recruitment picture is always changing within the NHS, and we always have recruitment gaps that we need filling. Current vacancies include this list here that you can see on the screen, but as I said, it's always worth having a look on several websites, which I'll show you in a second, because the recruitment picture is always changing, and in particular when we have things like the COVID-19 pandemic, we suddenly require different people in different roles from before. So if you are interested in a career within health and care, these can be some useful websites to get some more information about the types of roles that we have and the kind of skills, experiences or qualifications that those roles require. healthcareers.nhs.uk is really a fantastic website, and it's recently had a facelift, so it's worth checking out. everydayisdifferent.com is particularly for the social care sector. So if that element of healthcare interests you, definitely have a look at that website. And Step Into the NHS is a website that's usually used for people a little bit younger. So you're sort of secondary school age or just after leaving school. That's a good website for you to use. It has lots of videos, quizzes and things like that. It's a little bit friendlier to a younger audience. If you are interested in having a look at current vacancies within the NHS or social care sectors, the websites on the screen now can be really useful. And we'll have a look at the process used by the NHS Jobs website in the third video. That's all for today. If you do have any questions about careers within the NHS, or you want a little bit more advice or guidance about the recruitment process, please feel free to send us an email at work.experience@mbht.nhs.uk. Bye for now.